But to see the ones do that against a good Buffalo defense, a lot of their starters playing in that game as well, just another sign of encouragement, I think. And it's not just like last year's offense where it's like, even when they were successful, it's like it takes them 15 to 20 plays to do it, right? Like dink and dunk, get their way down the field, then find a way when they're in the red zone. They're finding explosive plays within this offense, whether that's Kenny hitting Freiermuth, ripping the middle of the seam with an absolute dart. I maybe his second or third best throw already of his pro career, I would say, like including last regular season. And then Jalen Warren finding an explosive play in the run game with unbelievable blocking. Dan Moore and Samalo sealing that edge. You got James Daniels pulling and climbing to the second level to get Matt Milano. And then the unsung hero of this, I think, turns it from a 15-yard gain into a 60-plus yard touchdown as Deontay Johnson's blocked down the field. So they're finding explosive plays within this offense. They scored 2 touchdowns outside of the 30 last year all season. They've done it 4 times so far this preseason.
Yeah, it's impressive. No matter how you chalk it up, this is an impressive thing from you're seeing, and I understand it is still preseason, so how much stock can you put into all of it? But the fact that they're able to move the ball, even against if it's not a complete first-team defense that they're going against, I think that's impressive just on its own merit because of what we've seen from the offense under Matt Canada, and even going back to last year, what you were talking about, where you kind of had to have these very long, drawn out, extended drives where you're talking about like 10 plus plays to be able to move the ball down the field and get into scoring position, let alone actually score. So I think from what we've seen from the ones this year in these 2 preseason games is very encouraging. It's showing a lot of growth from your quarterback in one, but just from the entire unit as a whole. The main thing that we've really worried about for the past several years was never on the defensive side of the ball. Is like, are we going to be able to put up points, and can we move the ball? And I think that they're showing that they were able to do that. And I think that Kenny is showing that he is poised to be able to be one of the, I'm not going to say he's one of the top end QBs in the NFL, but when it comes to actually being able to push the ball down the field and being able to compete in this like very competitive QB AFC, I think that he's showing that he's not a slouch. He's able to compete with some of these other guys that are in the AFC as well. And so that's something that the Steelers needed to happen, and it's something that Kenny has shown, and it's something the offense has shown in these 2 games. And like I keep going back to it's preseason, but I just don't think you can take it for granted what they're doing right now, because no matter who it's against, they're able to move the ball, and that's something that they wouldn't have been able to do regardless if they were going against like a third string defense a couple years ago. At least it felt that way. So I think it's super important that they gain the momentum now. That way, once we get to the actual season, we're just riding that into San Francisco. Because if you had a scenario where it just didn't seem like it was working out in the preseason, or they weren't really playing.
I mean, last year the offense was really bad in the preseason last year, and everyone was just blowing it off, saying it was the preseason. But then the same thing happened for most of the regular season.
Exactly, and the fact that they're playing the ones as much as they have. I mean, they didn't need to give them 2 reps, especially after they scored on the first drive of the game in game 2. But then they went out there and then it took 1 play to score again for them. That touchdown to Freiermuth, which I watched that play probably over 200 times.
I love that Kenny didn't even like strap
up.
Yeah, he was like, this is gonna be like 1 play. So
yeah, no, it's exciting and it's very encouraging. And then that Jalen Warren run was awesome. He really turned on the Jets. You got to see some of his skill set, and the whole play, watching it develop as you were talking through it as well. When it comes to Samalu to Johnson at the end of the play, and then him taking it all the way to the house, that's a play that you love to see. And I will say that's probably the only running play that I was actually impressed with. Definitely that one, but I
average like 1 yard per carry.
That's the thing. As much as I'm going to say I'm very impressed with the offense, I do think they still need to work on the run game a little bit.
But see, it's not a lot of the ones doing it though. Like it's the run game that we've seen that has failed in a lot of these first 2 preseason games has been like the second and third offensive line units as well. So I'm not like necessarily worried about that as much, at least. I mean, here's the thing. This third preseason game, I don't know what people were expecting. Talking with Alan, and then you look back at like how they handled that third preseason game last year. Um, we're gonna see the starters for probably a half or so. Like there, so let's find out. Like we're gonna find out in this game where this running game is at.
Okay, I would feel more comfortable with that because if you take away Jaylen Warren's long touchdown run, it looked absolutely atrocious from a box score standpoint of a run game. And I didn't want to take away from the offense at all. Like when I was talking about it, like I'm trying to give them their praise, but that's the one thing where it's like, okay, that needs to be hashed out a little bit more. But yeah, no, the Bills game offensively, I just feel like this team is so different, and I gotta give credit to Matt Canada too because they're executing the plays, but Matt Canada is the one, at least we think, is the one that's calling these plays. So
they're a lot of the same play. They're a lot of the same plays, though.
They're a lot of the same plays, but I feel like he's giving Kenny a longer leash or giving him more of the playbook, and they're, at least from a route tree standpoint, I feel like they are targeting over the middle a lot more than they did last year with Kenny as a rookie, at least from the limited time that we've seen. And maybe that's just Kenny being more comfortable throwing in that area.
I think that
that way.
I think that's the big thing. I think right or not, whether they should have done it or not, I think they were handling Kenny with kid gloves last year and not letting him start out progressions looking down the field. For example, on that Freiermuth touchdown, he's got Najee Harris in the flat. I don't know if you've noticed it. You said you went back and watched it a ton of times. I don't know if at any time you noticed Najee Harris there, but no one went over there and covered him. He could have checked it down and probably gotten a first down just by doing that. And if Najee could break one tackle there, he might have housed it on that play. But, and I think that's the read that he goes to last year. But now Kenny having full reign of this thing and feeling more comfortable within this offense, he's looking to take that shot. He's looking to fire that strike down the field. And that's what he took. So I think that right there, that one play alone, again, understanding it's preseason, showed us where Kenny is at right now this year as opposed to where he was at last season. I know we were all super encouraged with the signs, mainly because of like the late game heroics that he showed down the stretch last year, not necessarily, within the 20-yard lines and not necessarily for 4 quarters what he showed, but specifically what he was showing down the stretch and in big games. But if that translates to a guy that can, and that's typically like the last thing that comes for quarterbacks is their ability to perform within those situations. So if he's already got that down, if we can now get some more consistent play, get him better within the pocket, within the structure of a play, I think that the physical tools, which are always going to be like the thing that everybody thinks is good. Like no one's going to question his work ethic and the non-football playing aspect of being a quarterback when it comes to Kenny. It's what can he do? Like how good is his arm good enough? Are the physical traits good enough? And I think, I think they're good enough. I don't think he has elite traits. I don't think anything about him is necessarily elite, but I think it's good enough. And the thing there too, and I'm not comparing them, but I'm just looking at some of the great quarterback. Tom Brady, arguably the greatest of all time, he didn't have great traits. Like that's not what made him a 7-time Super Bowl champion. It's not like he had the greatest arm. It's not like he had the strongest, like his mind for the game, his ability to manipulate a pocket was what made him so great. Joe Burrow playing right now does not have elite traits. The way he sees the game and can slow it down and just process the game better than anybody else probably right now is what makes him so good. So I'm going on a tangent right now, basically to say that while I don't think Kenny Pickett has like any elite trait about him, I think he can be at least a top half of the lead quarterback, if not within that like 12 to 15 range, which 15 is half.
And that's what I was trying to say earlier when I was mentioning like the AFC quarterbacks too, because it's been said now, like looking at the AFC, if you don't have a quarterback, you're not going to win because look at all the quarterbacks that are in the AFC now. Yeah. I don't think that Kenny is going to be a top tier quarterback in the AFC or in the NFL in general. Like he's never going to be a Mahomes. He's never going to be an Allen. He's not that type of player, but he doesn't need to be. And that's going with what you were saying. Like you, especially whenever you tie into the team as a whole and you look at the defense that we have and the other traits of the offense, you don't need to have a Patrick Mahomes to win in the league. Sure, it's nice to have one, but I think if Kenny is able to connect all of the dots and to be able to be the best version of himself, he is pushing for like that like top 10 player in the,
I mean,
like
you look at the back end of the top 10. You look at guys like Dak, Kirk Cousins.
I would
Like
say
we talk about
I
that
was
part,
literally
and he
about to
could
say
be in
Kirk
there.
Cousins. Like
Yeah.
I think that that's a good comparison to have. Like that's where, if that's his ceiling, I would take that. Kirk Cousins has been a quarterback in the NFL for a long time. Sure, he can't win in a primetime game, but Kenny can. We've already seen it. So I'm
That's
not
the
worried
thing,
about that aspect.
and more
So,
mobile.
and he's more mobile. But if you're talking about where he's like a fringe top 10 guy, I think that's perfectly fine for the Steelers to be able to work with and to be able to win around that. And that's maybe even us like shorting Kenny a little bit. We don't know what this guy's ceiling is. I feel like Kenny probably has a better idea than we do, but we're just saying, if we're being conservative about where we think he could be, if that's where he's hovering around, like the 10 to 12 range, if he's connecting all the dots and getting to where he could be as an NFL starter, that could work perfectly for the Steelers, and I could see them winning with that, especially when you look at a full team's perspective and you include the defense in the whole equation. I think that would be perfectly fine. And so from what we've seen from Kenny, it seems like he's on that trajectory to get where he may not be a Patrick Mahomes, but he is going to be a Kirk Cousins. He can be very good in certain situations, and he's going to be good enough for the Steelers to win some games.
I think, Nick Farabaugh talks about this one a lot. I think people forget how good Alex Smith was. Like, before Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, Alex Smith was there, and they were winning a lot of football games. They were regularly in the playoffs. Like, I know that he lost his job in San Fran because, well, Kaepernick was also cheaper at the time too. But Alex Smith was a good player. And if you have an Alex Smith type player within this offense with the weapons the Steelers have, I think that you can be a competitive football team. I'm not saying one-for-one comparisons, but when you look at the athletic traits that Alex Smith had, the Kennys, his ability to win football games with what he does down the stretch, just the way he sees the game right now, it seems like mentally develops things at a quicker level and processes things. I think that's probably the best comp. Now, that's obviously not like a current one, so I understand why people don't go to that one a lot. But when Nick said that, I think that one made a lot of sense. We talked about the weapons within the offense, and two of those guys in the backfield, Jaylen Warren, Najee Harris, sparked a lot of debate when you talked within the fan base. It's funny because it's literally the